What is going on, guys? My name is Michael James. I am a published author and full-time writer, and it is currently 2:20 in the morning while I'm shooting this video, but I'm awake because I'm a writer. You know the writer life. So get yourself a cup of coffee and grab your favorite cozy sweater for writing. You gotta be cozy when you're typing out those words, and let's get into character building. Now, the first reason you want to do character building is because if you don't do character building, you may fall into this issue where you kind of build this really boring character that no one wants to read about. Like you don't want to do that. So, to avoid this mistake of having a character that's bland or a character that maybe they're relatable, but so relatable that they're just kind of not interesting, they're not unique, they're not this story doesn't feel like it is around them. This story could have been written about any other character in the world that you made up. You know, that's what you don't want to happen. You want your character to be so unique that your reader says, these events that take place in this story could have only happened to this guy. That's what you want. You want your character to have unique traits about them, unique behaviors about them that sets them apart so that not only are they interesting to read about, but they're still relatable and they're still engaging for your audience because they're going to be relating to your character while they're also intrigued by your character and interested in the things that they triumph over and the things that they fail at. They want to know those things so that they can almost build a relationship with your character. The second reason you want to work on character development and why it's so important is because your story will not be worth reading if your characters are not interesting. And this kind of goes along with the last one, how you want to have a unique character and a likable character, but you also want to have a character that has some kind of goal in mind, and that's what makes the story worth telling. You want your reader to think, man, I want them to reach their goal. You know, whatever happens in the story, there's usually a main character that has some sort of goal, and usually the villains have some sort of goal as well, and usually the allies have some sort of goal as well, even if their goal is as simple as helping the hero reach victory, you know, whatever it is. So, I'll give you a few examples. Harry Potter, his goal is to defeat Lord Voldemort. Bilbo, his goal is to help the dwarves get back their home in Erebor or wherever it was. Marty McFly, his goal is to get back to 1985 and reunite his parents so that he can actually get there and stay alive. You know, there has to be some sort of goal in the story in order for your character to be interesting and for your reader to want to cheer them on like a cheerleader as they're reading and be like, go, 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 you got this. So you want to have a goal that is worth telling, and to do that, you need to have an interesting character. Because if your character's bland, the goal is most likely bland, and the story won't be worth telling. Alright, so the third reason you want to be building your characters and having a character sketch is because, like I said in the second reason, how they're going to have some kind of goal that makes a story worth reading about, they most likely have motivations towards that goal. And if there's no motivation, then there's no reason for them to even go for the goal. For example, if we're talking about Harry Potter again, Harry Potter's motivation to defeat Lord Voldemort is that Voldemort killed his parents, and he is the chosen one because he tried to kill Harry, and his mother's love, or whatever it was, saved his life. So he is the chosen one to defeat Lord Voldemort. He has the power to do it, and because he has this motivation from, you took my parents from me, now I'm going to take you out, like, that is the motivation for his goal. And if you do a character sketch, it is so much easier to figure out, what is my main character's motivations? What is causing him to want to defeat the bad guy or to reach the victory line or whatever it is? There has to be some sort of motivation. And this is a mistake that a lot of writers make. They have a goal in mind and they have a goal that's worth talking about, but they don't have really motivations that drive their character there. They just have their character decide one day, you know what, I'm going to try to do this. And it's like, well, why? Why are they trying to do this? Is it because they're jealous of someone else reaching the success? Is it because something happened to their loved ones and that's pushing them to do this? Is it because, like, danger is in the way and their life is on the line? They're forced into this situation? Whatever it is, there should be some kind of driving motivation. And to add to that, a lot of times the incident that takes place in the beginning of the story that causes the turmoil, causes the normal life to get flipped upside down, is what forces your character to be motivated in order to go after something. So sometimes the motivation isn't like hoorah, let's get this. Sometimes the motivation is like, oh, I don't want to do this, but I don't have a choice anymore. So whatever the case may be, there needs to be some kind of driving motivation inside of your character so that they actually reach for their goal. And this is the same for, not even talking about heroes, but this is the same for villains. If you have a villain, they're going to be so one-dimensional and bland if they don't have some kind of motivation that drives them to do what they do. If they're trying to take over the world, most likely it's because something happened in their past or they saw something that changed the way they look at life and now they're doing what they're doing. They are an evil guy for a reason, you know, and a lot of times villains think they're doing the right thing. They think that, no, I'm right about this, I do deserve this, I should do this. So a lot of times villains from their point of view think they're doing the right thing and they have a motivation that causes them to think that way. That's kind of the third reason why you want to be building your character and having a character sketch prepared so that you can have some kind of motivation behind your goal that makes the story worth telling. Alright, so the fourth reason we want to talk about our characters and really build out a sketch of who they are is because it's important to remember your character should have internal and external conflicts. And if you don't prepare this beforehand and you don't think about what kind of character you want to have, then it's going to be a lot more difficult to figure out what their internal and external conflicts are. If you're just kind of writing a story and you're just making it up as you go, your character might be a little bland because they don't have anything going on the inside that's bothering them. And there may not be as many physical obstacles that there should be. So it's really important to think about what are the things that I want this character to struggle with. And it's really important if these things contradict. So, for example, maybe your character has an internal issue with murder. He does not like killing, he doesn't like death, he doesn't want death to happen. So because of that, you can have one of the external obstacles that he has to go through is a friend dying, or whatever the case may be, something like that causes these things to contradict, because that's what's going to pull at the heartstrings of your reader, and they're going to have sympathy for your character when they go through all these trials that you put in front of them, and the character is going to have to deal with things emotionally while they're going through life and dealing with the external obstacles as well. And then last but not least, it's important to have a character that is not a perfectionist. You don't want your character to look like there's nothing wrong with them, they have no issues. Yeah, they face obstacles, but they're always perfect and always overcoming them. You want your character to have unique strengths and weaknesses, even if they're things you don't think have anything to do with your story. For example, maybe you want your character to be awesome at solving a Rubik's Cube. That is one of his strengths, his talents. He's really good at puzzles and solving Rubik's Cubes, right? Well, you can use that to his advantage somewhere in the story. Maybe there's a puzzle he has to solve, or maybe there's a code he has to crack later in the story, and this is going to come in handy because your reader's going to think, oh, if he can solve a Rubik's Cube, he could definitely figure out this problem, you know? So little things like that. You want to figure out little strengths, little talents that your character has, but on the flip side, you also want to figure out what kind of weaknesses does my character have? Does my character have weaknesses that, you know, maybe he is prideful, maybe he's selfish, maybe he has a temper, maybe he has a problem trusting people, maybe he has a problem giving too much trust to people, and that turns into issues. So whatever the case may be, your character should have weaknesses. And again, these things should either contradict or cause the internal and external conflicts to like go up and down throughout the story. You want these things to be brought out. You want to show your reader what the weakness of your character is, and then after showing your reader, you want to be like, watch this, I'm going to make him go through that issue where he has an obstacle. So a great example of this is one of Marty McFly's strengths in Back to the Future is that he's really good at fighting off bullies, standing up for himself, and he is a good problem solver. He can get out of his sticky situations really well, and that's why he's the cool kid, you know? But then one of his weaknesses is he doesn't stand down from a fight, and he's prideful, and this causes him to get into the issues, and he wouldn't have to have all these moments where he's trying to solve a problem if he would just not fight the bullies, or if the bullies call him chicken, if he just didn't do anything about it. If he just learned to walk away, then none of these issues would have came to be. But that's what makes a story. So You want these things to contradict, just like the internal and external conflicts and everything else in your story. So those are 5 different reasons why you want to build a character sketch. Now we're going to go over 10 different questions you should ask yourself when building your character. Alright, so for your character sketch, I'm going to recommend you grab yourself 10 note cards because note cards are so useful. What I usually do is I take my note cards and I will pin them to my tack board so that I can look at them all in one spot and be like, okay, this is who my character is, now I got that figured out, and I'll do the same thing with different scene ideas I have for my story, and I'll try to align them in chronological order so that I have ideas for chapters and stuff. I also do the same thing when I'm just trying to figure out what I want in a story. I'll put character names on some cards, I'll put the name of the place that it's going to take place in, I put the genre on note cards. Note cards are so helpful. Maybe you're more of a notepad guy and you like notebooks or whatever. That's totally cool too. Whatever it is, I really recommend that all writers use something physical instead of just typing on your computer, because it's really easy to look at either a blank screen or even a screen full of words and just feel overwhelmed and not really put any effort into writing your story when you get stuck, especially if you've written maybe the first few chapters and now you're just like, I have to go back and edit those, I have to fix things, I have to figure out what's coming next, and you're just overwhelmed and the story sits. So I really recommend using note cards. It's going to motivate you to keep going. So anyway, get yourself 10 note cards or a notebook with 10 pages or whatever. And for your first note card, the question that you are going to be answering is, who's the character? It might seem pretty simple, but you want to ask yourself, who is the character? And I'm going to use the example of Shrek, because I love that movie, one of the best movies DreamWorks has ever put out, and if you disagree, then there's an issue here. But we're going to use Shrek, and Shrek is the main character of his story, and that's what I'm going to be talking about for all these examples. So who is the character? Shrek. He's big, tall, scary ogre, lives in a swamp, and no friends or family that we know of in the beginning of the story. So those are just some unique traits to describe him, and just kind of like an overall summary of who this character is, right? Second note card is what makes his character unique. So things that make Shrek unique are he's the only ogre in the story that we know of in the beginning, and he lives alone in a swamp, and he seems to enjoy his privacy. We get that feeling right from the beginning when he's painting a sign and he kisses it and it says, I think it says keep out ogres or danger ogres, something like that. And he enjoys being able to scare off the guys that are hunting for him. Like, he just likes living alone in his swamp. That's what he enjoys. So that's a unique trait about him. Next question is, what is Shrek's goal? So what is your character's goal? And his goal is to gain back the privacy of his swamp. Now we know this goal after the incident takes place, and the goal usually doesn't come up in the story until an incident takes place and it changes the norm and it tips the scale. So now your character feels like they need to do something about it to get something back or to return to the norm or whatever the case may be. So the goal of Shrek is to gain back the privacy of his swamp. This happens after the fairy tale creatures, as one of the 3 pigs says, are evicted from by Lord Farquaad. So, question number 4 you should be asking is, what are the specific motivations? And we talked about this already, but the specific motivations for Shrek are fairy tale creatures were sent to the swamp, and Lord Farquaad promises to leave him alone if he goes on a quest. So first, fairy tale creatures are in a swamp, and he wants them out, so he's like, I'm going to go talk to this guy. Talks to the guy, and the guy says, okay, I'll leave you alone if you go on this quest. So now he's motivated to get back the privacy of his swamp if he completes this quest. Number 5 is what is at stake. And the things in Shrek that are at stake are the privacy of Shrek's swamp, Shrek and Donkey's lives, and the life of the princess once they save her. So those are the things that are at stake for Shrek, and those are the things he's trying to protect in a way, or keep them intact before the end of the story so that he can reach his goal of privacy. Question number 6 is, what are they willing to risk? So what is your character willing to risk? And this might differ from what is at stake, because they might have their life at stake, but they might not be willing to risk a life in this quest that they're on, in this adventure that they're on, the journey that they're taking to reach their goal. Maybe your character does not want to risk death, but even though they don't want to risk it, they're on this perilous journey that risks their life. So it's contradicting, but that's what makes a story a story. It causes all of these conflicts, and it really makes your story come to life when your character has to face all of these things that they're like, I'm against this, but I have to do this, but should I do this? And all of those kind of issues. So what is Shrek willing to risk? Well, he's willing to risk the comfort of his home, because he could have just stayed home and tried to scare off all the fairy tale creatures, or he could have just stayed at home and tried to deal with it. But he's risking that by going on this quest, because if he dies on the quest, obviously he doesn't get that back, or if he fails. But he's also risking to put up with Donkey. He is allowing this to happen in order to reach his goal of getting the privacy of his swamp back. And you could just tell throughout the story, he is so annoyed with Donkey, especially in the beginning. And then he's also willing to risk his life facing the dragon. So we know that we can see that Shrek is brave, because he's not afraid to go face this dragon if it means getting the privacy of his swamp back. And when you look at a story in the grand scheme of things, this seems like such a petty thing. Like, you're willing to risk your entire life just for some privacy? Like, are you serious? But hey, that's Shrek, and it's still a great movie. Alright, next question that you should be asking yourself is, what is the external conflict? These are the physical obstacles in your world, and some of the ones in Shrek are Lord Farquaad's men. He has to fight them in an awesome epic scene, and it's really cool. Another scene is he has to put up with Donkey. We see this over and over again. He has to fight the dragon. He has to deal with the merry men. Well, technically Fiona deals with them, but he has to do that. The arrow in the butt. He got an arrow in the butt. That was pretty funny. And then Princess Fiona's demands. So that's another physical thing that's in the story that he has to deal with. Those are the external obstacles he is overcoming for the most part. There are probably a few more that I could have listed, but you get the point. Next is, what are the internal conflicts? What are the things that are bothering him on the inside? And sometimes the inner conflicts don't really get shown in a story until later on. Sometimes you don't see them until the story continues to progress, and then you're like, oh, something's bothering him. Like, your reader's getting the feeling that this is coming up a lot. This is coming up frequently. So one of the things that comes up frequently is Shrek's temper. We see that Shrek struggles with his temper. So then you might ask yourself, why is he always so angry? And part of it might be because he wants his privacy back, but we also see that he has a struggle with tolerating others. He is not good at building friendships and seeing the goodness in others. And another thing he struggles with is he thinks that he's unlikable. He thinks that he's a big, fat, stupid, ugly ogre, and why would anyone want to spend time with me? So then that answers the question, oh, this is why he wants the privacy of his swamp. He wants to be alone so that he doesn't have to be a bother to anyone else, because he doesn't think that anyone else wants to spend time with him in the first place. So it all makes sense once the inner conflict is brought out. So this is something that may not be answered till later in your story, but that's kind of, you want everything to come full circle and make sense like that. So the next question you want to go over, this is question number 9, I believe. What are the strengths of your character? So Shrek's strengths are, he's strong, he's scary, he doesn't fear anything, he's brave. And those are the things that you see over and over in the story. Shrek is not afraid of anything, and he's just this big brute of an ogre. It's awesome. And then finally, you could probably guess what question number 10 is. What is the weakness of your character? And Shrek's weaknesses are struggles to build friendships, he doesn't love himself, he struggles to see others' perspectives. You see him get into arguments with Donkey when Donkey's trying to tell him where he's going wrong and he doesn't want to hear it. And Shrek has a temper. So a lot of times the inner conflicts are going to be similar to the weaknesses. Sometimes they might be different. If you have more physical weaknesses they have, like maybe, you could say one of Shrek's weaknesses is he's fat. But, it could be anything. There's literally a list of things that I could have put here for his weakness or his strengths. Honestly, one of his weaknesses could be that he's an ogre. That causes him to be more disgusted and unliked by other people in the story in the beginning. Especially when he goes to Lord Farquaad's castle and everybody's like, oh my gosh, an ogre. But then they start liking him because he's a great fighter. But you get the point. So those are the 10 questions you should be asking yourself when you are trying to build a character. And if you ask these 10 questions, you're going to have a very, good understanding of who your character is and some things about them and how to really orchestrate that into your story. And remember, the character is the main function of a story. Without a character, you can't have a story. You can't tell a story without a character. They are the main element of a story that you need in order for you to be able to tell a story. Because anytime someone tells a story, it's either about themselves or about some fictional character or some real person that they're talking about, and they're going on some kind of adventure, or they're going to be researching something, or they're going to be learning something, or they're trying to win something. Whatever the case may be, it's all about the character. So make sure that you are taking the time to actually define who your character is, so that in the long run, once you're writing your story, you already have your character defined. You know the kind of things you want to pull out. You know the kind of talents you want to show. And it's going to make your story really come to life. So hopefully these tips were helpful. If you have more questions that you think should have been added to these 10, leave them in the comments below. Or if you have other video ideas that I should be putting out, let me know. I could really use the feedback from you guys. So please leave a like if you like the video, or leave a comment if you have some advice or tips, or even want to add to what I've said here today. And yeah, subscribe if you want to see more. Hopefully I'll be putting out 2 videos a month or so. So those are all the tips I have for you. Keep on writing, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one.